Well,
Yeah, I was going to ask, because there was two questions. One was for those of us who use QuickBooks, just to confirm what operating profit would be there. And the second question is, what is the range? You do it per fiscal year, or do you do it year to date, or what sort of range do you look
I'll
at?
answer the second one. The range you'd want to use would be 12 months. You'd want to use a 12-month income statement. And then the first question for operating profit would be your profit, your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So it'd be your EBITDA.
Would it be safe to
The
Yeah.
EBITDA is which one?
No, Amy, go ahead.
How would you suggest we handle our income profit loss information from 2020? Can we ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist?
No, I wouldn't ignore it, because if you went to the bank, they're not going to ignore it. Do we want to put it in context? Certainly. I know a lot of my clients, 2020 was very different than what they had seen before in terms of their financials. And that's why most banks, in making a lending decision, they're going to look at 3 years of financials. So they're going to look at 2018, 2019, 2020. And even then, if 2020 is a complete outlier in terms of your numbers, they're going to discount those as well. Particularly, they're going to ask you for the story, what happened in 2020. And with a good explanation, they're going to put less weight on those numbers than they would 2019, 2018. But they're not going to totally, discount the numbers, because they are what they are. But that's why I would suggest in looking at the Z-score is run the number for 2020, do it for 2019, do it for 2018. Yeah. Other question.
Tim, this is John. Just in terms of operating profit, there's two different definitions. One is EBITDA and one is EBIT. And so this particular example, they're using operating expenses, including depreciation. So it's EBIT versus EBITDA.
The important thing is to be consistent. Pick one. If it were me, I would do it before depreciation, particularly if I'm a manufacturing business and I have a very big depreciation expense, because it could impact that number. But the most important thing is just be consistent in terms of whatever one you use, and make sure you use the same formula year in, year out.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
So I was confused about that. Not going back up, I can see where it fits on my financial statements, but the name of it is kind of what gets me. So gross profit is always before like all your expenses, and then operating is after you subtract all of the expenses as well?
Yeah, Christine, gross profit is after your cost of sales, after your direct expenses, before your operating expenses. And then your operating profit will then be after you've subtracted your operating expenses or your overhead, same thing, whatever you want to call it.
So on QuickBooks, it would be the net operating income.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So this Z-score is essentially your business credit score. Every bank in the country that I know of calculates something very similar to the Z-score in making a lending decision. So Wells Fargo might call it their Wells Fargo business credit score. Bank of America is going to call it their BOA number. I don't know. But every bank calculates something very similar to the Z-score in making a lending decision. So what I would suggest is before you go to the bank to talk about a bank loan, calculate your Z-score. Have an idea of what it is, not only this year, but the last 3 years. Look at your Z-score over the last 3 years. See what direction is it trending. Now, the good news is the template that you're going to get from me and from the SBDC also will calculate your Z-score. So you'll never have to calculate this again. All you have to do is plug in your numbers and it'll calculate it for you. Okay? I saw something in the chat. So what we used for equity was $120,000, Christine, in calculating the Z-score.